Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Absolutely.
Questions.
Representative Cain, we were talking up there, and I was asking when I might be able to ask you about a couple of definitions with regard to amendments. What does "in connection with an official ballot" mean?
Could you point me to the line in it so I read in connection?
I sure can. Page 15, lines 17 and 18.
17 and 18.
Yeah, on page 15. So this is in your
Vote
definition,
harvesting.
vote harvesting.
Representative Scofield just walked by and reminded me we have an amendment that's going to fix this.
Oh, okay, good.
But by the way, in connection with the official ballot, it's so hard to define terms based on what they are. I have a feeling in my brain that says connected to an official ballot, but I think we've got some clarifying language coming up in an amendment.
Great, and I'll gladly look at those, but I want you to know the reason I'm asking is because I'm thinking about this from a prosecutor perspective. Because you're making this a felony, which means if I were still assigned to the DA's office, I'd have to decide who I can prosecute and I can't. And most of the times we have definitions of terms so that there's some clarification. So I will gladly look at the amendment, but that is a question.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Is this a fact question, or would that be a question for the jury?
I think there's a fine line between what's a fact question, what's a definition of law. And if you look in the penal code in section 1.07, we have definitions of terms, or we have definitions of terms in a chapter. You have definition of terms in here, but I don't see a definition of the term in connection with an official ballot. So my question...
Well, I guess it would be a question for the jury then. And
I don't think so, because you have to give notice. And so if the question is of notice, because you and Vice Chair Gonzalez disagreed, if my wife is standing...
Gentleman's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask for an extension of time to go through a couple questions?
Members heard the motion. No objection. Chair hears none. The motion is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Mr. Cain.
So the question is, if somebody's outside a poll and someone's going in to cast their vote, is that location in connection with an official ballot?
Well, so we got to read it in context of things. So, for example, on page 16 at line 4, this is that subsection E. It says, "This section does not apply to political speech or other acts merely promoting a candidate or a measure that don't involve direct interaction with an application for a ballot by mail in the presence of the voter or a voter's official ballot voted by mail or carrier envelope." I guess when people are voting out at locations, I don't see where that ever comes into play.
I appreciate that, and I have the same quotations on 16, line 9, because my question is, your definition says a voter's official ballot, comma, ballot voted by mail, comma, or carrier envelope. I think carrier envelope would have a clear definition, if not by statute, by dictionary.
Yeah. No,
I think ballot voted by mail, again, is a recognizable thing, but I am genuinely confused as a prosecutor preparing for this trial, or to give notice to a defendant. Is a voter's official ballot an electronic machine?
I guess it could be.
Or is it just paper?
Yeah. Well, there are paper ballots, and that's, we want to be clear, this is their official ballot, not some other ballot. Yeah.
So the question would be, is this just limited to mail ballots, or is this also attributable to the machines when we go to a polling location? And so I would ask the author to consider that, because I don't know that we're giving notice.
Please. It's my understanding this is really about mail and mail-in ballot applications, the envelope and the ballot that would go inside the security envelope, which goes inside the carrier envelope.
Would the author be acceptable to a friendly amendment to clarify that this section is limited to mail ballots only?
By the way, so if you offered to bring Representative Scofield, I think we had some language to help clarify this, and maybe we could all talk and get it going.
All right, yeah. And then let me ask you one other thing. And again, this might go to the same concept. Or during the voting process, can you give me the definition of what it means to be voting process?
And what page and line number are you on?
So voting process.
Because usually things in context matters. I mean, voting process could be inside the polling place while people are voting. I guess voting process could be while someone's filling out their ballot. I guess I'd like to see the language that surrounds it. Understand exactly what that means here.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. It's not on purpose. Why? No, it's fine.
We're trying to.
I'm gonna have to look.
We're trying to Google it right now or at least look it up on a PDF version of the bill. But we can come back to it. Once he gets to it, I'll try and answer that.
That's great. On page 16, for services other than the vote harvesting services provided, can you also tell me what the definition of services is?
All right, let's do this. So we're on page 16. What line are we on?
Lines 14 through 16.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
So subsection F in this section, compensation or other benefit in exchange for vote harvesting services is inferred if a person who performed the vote harvesting services for a candidate or campaign solicits, receives, or is offered compensation from the candidate. I'm not understanding what the problem is. For services other than the vote harvesting services provided. The idea is trying to get around by an indirect payment.
So your definition of services, again, it's inferring, which is a very unique concept in the penal code, and you're saying for services. So do you mean financial compensation?
Yeah, compensation or other benefit. So compensation means money or other benefit, could mean political favors and other things like that. I think it's defined here in the code. Benefit means anything reasonably regarded as a gain or advantage, including a promise or offer of employment. Political favor, which I hope we all think is not a good thing, or a favorable discretionary official act, and a benefit to any other person whose welfare the beneficiary has an interest. So like
just to
buying someone's
just to
kid a
clarify,
car.
I'm not talking about the benefit. I'm talking about 16. 15, it says, is offered compensation from the candidate or campaign directly through a third party, quote, for services other than the vote harvesting services provided. My question is, what does for services on line 15 at the end of the sentence? Do we have a definition of services in that context?
That definition would be, in its context, is for services other than vote harvesting services.
Correct. What is services?
Well, I guess I'd be left up to the prosecutor and the jury to figure
Actually, it's not. We follow the law of definitions, and as I mentioned earlier, you can either put a definition in 1.07 in the penal code, or you can put a definition in the subchapter. And if you don't put a definition in the subchapter, then we're going to defer to the dictionary. And the dictionary says to offer help. So are you intending it to be that broad that services is to offer help? Because I'm thinking about Vice Chair Gonzalez's question earlier when she said, if my wife is standing outside pushing cards for me, promoting me as a candidate, and my wife is married to me and offers me help daily and gratefully, and she does get insurance, and that insurance is part of our marriage, is my wife technically now a third-degree felon under your statute?
Yeah, I guess services other than that means some other kind of service.
So I need a definition, because other than that, you're leaving it up to a significant amount of prosecutorial discretion, right?
I'm not sure, but I mean, I believe that you believe that.
No. This is Texas law. We make the policy.
Yeah.
Prosecutors prosecute
it's
the
worded
law,
fine, but
and we do it by definitions. And you're not providing me a definition as a prosecutor.
Well, look, there's a lot of definitions in the code, and we'd get nowhere if we had to define every term and word. However, I will say, I'm glad you brought this up. Let's talk about it. A lot of people have been talking to us for the last few months.
So this is the only time we could talk about it, because we know once we start voting on these amendments, they're going to go red and blue. We already know the outcome of this, and to let the people of Texas know what your notice is on whether or not they're going to be a third-degree felon, this is it.
Ms. Johnson, you may recall, early on in this session, I sent out a send out a letter to every member of this body, say, hey, come talk to us. We want to have some inputs. We want to hear from people. And it's the first thing brought it up. Let's talk about it. Representative Schofield and Jatana over here and clarify it so we can look and try and understand it with you. Okay? I'm not against that. So let's chat. Now we can do this longer.
I don't want to do it longer,
we can try and
but
look
also
at
let
it.
me tell you,
Because you mentioned whether or how the votes would go. And let's talk about it so that we can help clarify things.
okay, so let me also reference, because you asked where I was getting during the voting process. It's on 14, line 17. So again, it says influence the independent exercise of the vote of another in the presence of the ballot. So again, my question is, what is the presence
During the
of the
voting
ballot?
process? That's existing law. I guess that's during the process of someone voting. Yeah, during the voting process.
So again, and it says including by altering the ballot of another. And so my question goes back to, is ballot an electronic machine, or are you limiting this law to paper ballots being submitted and received through the U.S. mail?
Is intended to be altering the ballot of another, and that's however that is. That is wrong if someone knowingly or intentionally makes any effort to alter someone's ballot, whether it's digital, virtual, paper.
So Representative Cain, I'm just letting you know, as a prosecutor, you have to give notice. And if I'm asking you that I can't figure out what your intention of his ballot, and it's a simple question of machine or paper, and you can clarify.
The gentleman's time is expiring.
Mr. Speaker, may the time be extended.
Ms. Johnson, that requires unanimous consent. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The gentleman's time is extended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Cain, I would ask if you would please, because we know this is passing, before you put a law that makes Texans a third-degree felon 2 to 10 years in prison, that you have the decency to describe to them these terms so they know what they can and cannot be prosecuted for.
All right, let's be helpful. So, right now, the way this is written, it says state jail felony. I get an amendment to take it down to a Class A misdemeanor, because that's actually where I think it should be.
Great.
It should be restored back to where it is, because I think prosecutors actually need misdemeanors sometimes.
Say that again.
I think prosecutors need misdemeanors. They don't need you. If you have all felonies, you can't work things, And this bill, I think this was House Bill 542. This language is almost identical. We went down on the crime level. We're going to go even lower. I believe it was by Representative Greg Bonin that this language was done. It passed this chamber at 98 to 40 something. It passed our committee. I believe something like 7-2 or maybe it was 5-4. It's already passed committee in the Senate doing this identical thing. And questions weren't raised then when we went over this exact thing.
Do you mean the first time when you shut down the hearing, or the second time you had a hearing?
No, House Bill 542 is Section 5.03 of this bill, except in that bill, the crime was even higher. I think it was like third-degree felony or something like that. And so this bill has it as a state jail felony. But I've got an amendment drafted to make it return it back to Class A misdemeanor.
Well, let's go, since you want to talk about punishment range, let's go back to the discussion of if my wife is outside a polling place and encouraging people to vote for me as they walk in to cast their ballot, and she receives a service from a third-party vendor, which is insurance because of her marriage to me and the fact that she is a wonderful, loving wife that provides me help, which meets the definition of the dictionary, which I would have to refer to since you've not provided a definition. Is my wife now a third-degree felon? Is that your intention, that she's going to go to prison?
I don't think so. It's not in
2 to 10
connection
years?
with the official ballot.
I'm sorry, what's not official
I don't
ballot?
think that service is in connection, like the purpose. It has a nexus with your vote.
So the problem is, if you look at page 16 on line 12, you have defined that her benefit from a third party is inferred to be harvesting. And that's why I said,
if they're doing
really
something in
grasp
connection
for something we don't
with a
do in the
vote.
penal code.
Well, if it's in connection with the vote, that is what it says.
No. It says you're going to infer that compensation is for vote harvesting services, even though it's from some other party. So you're not asking for direct benefit. You're implying that anybody who is getting any compensation from services from a campaign,
Yeah, we're going to
individual
infer
or a
it.
third party.
But hold on. I think it makes sense. We're going to infer it if you perform vote harvesting services. So we're going to infer if you perform vote harvesting services, which is a defined term, for a candidate or a campaign. If you solicit, meaning you ask for money, if you receive money, or if you're offered money, why can't we infer that you were compensated if you ask to be paid to perform a vote harvesting service, which the code defines?
Which code?
I mean,
we're
I'm sorry,
talking about the
bill.
Penal Code Election Code.
Yeah, the bill defines it.
But-
Yes.
And the bill is referring to the codes. And so I'm asking you, very genuinely.
No, the bill has the term vote harvesting service defined.
And that's
at
fine.
Line 16, page 15.
I got that definition. The problem is you're inferring compensation for services by a third party
Yeah.
as
If
an
you
intent
asked
of
for
payment
money,
for vote harvesting. So that's the hypothetical. The hypothetical is my wife receives insurance benefits. The service, because you're not giving me a definition, could be that she helps me daily by walking the dogs, feeding the dogs, helping me, right? And she gets insurance from a third-party vendor that can be considered financial. And now she's going to go stand outside and have on a T-shirt that says Ann Johnson, and she's going to tell a group of people coming to the ballot, please vote for my wife. That violates
I don't
your
see that
third-degree
happening.
felony.
I don't see that being.
But that's the
possibility.
question, which is you
There's
don't
no way.
see it happening.
There's no way it's going to happen.
Okay,
Can't happen.
so let's go through the analysis here, because you say you don't see it happening, but the decision is prosecutorial discretion, correct?
There's no court that's going to allow somebody to prosecute. And that when you read it,
What-
we
now
all
wait.
know what it means.
I know
Okay.
you say that, but this is what I'm asking you.
Uh-huh.
Follow me through with penal code law. I'm going to trust that you know the election law since you're the chair of the elections. Prosecutorial discretion is warranted to every county, right?
But
Do you know that? Are you aware of that?
I'll trust you.
Okay, great. Will you also trust me that prosecutors are elected individuals with a partisan tag?
They're elected, and I think we have things in place to try and restrain that partisan tag. Yes.
No. Prosecutors are elected with a partisan tag. We
Partisan
have the
tag.
ability to make them nonpartisan because that's what we do in other elections.
I think
But
you're saying that they're always
prosecutors
partisan or something.
are elected with a partisan tag. And you are giving a law to partisan individuals with complete prosecutorial discretion on a third-degree felony, of which I have just articulated a fact pattern that could easily fall into the hands of a wrong prosecutor with voter intimidation.
Mm-hmm. But for one, I think somebody had a member to go to a state jail, but I think it has to be a connection with the ballot. I'm sorry,
The
I
ballot.
disagree with your reading of that.
So let's say that people are walking in, the ballot's right there. Right, you know that 1,000-foot marker? I know you know this because you're the chair of elections. There's a 1,000-foot marker. We have to stand outside of it, and the ballot is right there. It's the moment, and that's the question of during the election and voting process. When does the process
this
begin?
is paying somebody for them to do something in connection with the ballot. I don't think we're...
Will you please amend your law so that is clear? Because that's not what your law says. That's not what your bill says.
Well, Representative, I believe I've invited you to come down and talk with Representative Schofield and others to
All
look
right,
at doing
I'll do
that.
it. I appreciate the invitation to
Yeah.
help you amend this law, to provide notice, and to stop prosecutorial discretion to go after political opponents. And I thank you very much. And apparently my wife is going to thank you too, since you might set her up for a felony in 2022.